Elon Musk stepped into the studio. The cameras followed his every move in absolute silence, capturing each measured step as if sensing the gravity of the moment. No one in the room, not the producers, not the live audience, not even the host himself, could predict that within the next 30 minutes, the tables would turn so dramatically that the man who prided himself on asking the toughest questions would suddenly find himself without any answers. From the very first second, the tension was suffocating. The overhead lights blazed down, casting sharp shadows on the stage, highlighting every subtle expression on Bryant Palmer's face. The legendary interviewer who had built his career dismantling the egos of CEOs, reducing Hollywood A-listers to nervous laughter, and leaving politicians stammering under his scrutiny. He was used to holding the reins, to directing the conversation like a master conductor leading an orchestra. But tonight, things would be different. Because tonight, he wasn't sitting across from just another guest. Tonight, he was sitting across from Elon Musk. The audience sat in rapt anticipation, eyes fixed on the stage, their excitement palpable. This was more than just an interview. It was a battle of wits, a psychological showdown between two men who had spent years commanding attention in completely different ways. Palmer, with his razor-sharp words and ability to control a narrative. Musk, with his unshakable confidence and unpredictable nature. What no one realized was that Palmer, the seasoned interrogator, would soon become the one being examined. Have you ever witnessed an interview morph into a psychological duel? A moment where the person who appears to be in control suddenly finds themselves completely at a loss? Watch closely, because we're about to witness will forever change the way you perceive the media. That morning, the California sky was impossibly clear, a canvas of perfect blue. But inside Elon Musk's office, a storm was quietly brewing. Amidst the flood of emails from investors, business partners, and journalists, one subject line stood out like a bold challenge. Invitation to the Bryant Palmer Show. Elon barely glanced at it at first. He received dozens of similar invitations every single day. News outlets, talk shows, industry panels, everyone wanted a piece of him. He had learned to ignore most of them. But then, something made him pause. Bryant Palmer. The name carried weight, not just in the world of television, but across the entire media landscape. Palmer wasn't just a talk show host. He was an interrogator, a predator disguised as an entertainer. His show wasn't about discussion. It was about dismantling. CEOs, celebrities, politicians, they all walked onto his stage believing they could handle him. They all walked off having learned a hard lesson. Bryant Palmer didn't just ask questions. He set traps. His guests thought they were coming to share their insights, but they left with their reputations bruised, their carefully constructed public images reshaped into something unrecognizable. His ability to corner, provoke, and dismantle his interviewees had made him one of the most feared figures in broadcasting. Musk knew this. He had watched it happen to others. He had seen how Palmer's calculated words could twist a simple response into a scandal, how a pause too long could be interpreted as guilt, and yet he hesitated. His finger hovered over the email, his mind turning. Elon, we think this is a great opportunity to reach millions of viewers. His assistant's note was logical. Millions would be watching. Millions would be listening. But Elon Musk did not need more exposure. He was already one of the most recognized figures on the planet. His name alone commanded global headlines. Publicity wasn't what interested him. It was the game. Palmer was a master at what he did. He dictated the tempo, controlled the conversation, manipulated the narrative. He thrived in his arena, always holding the power. But what happens when a master is forced to play by someone else's rules? Musk smirked slightly. One simple instruction left his lips: book it. Across the city, in a towering skyscraper that housed one of the most powerful media operations in the country, a producer walked briskly into a conference room, a tablet in hand. Bryant Palmer sat at the head of the table, reviewing notes for an upcoming segment. Elon Musk has accepted. Palmer didn't react immediately. He simply leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly against the polished wooden surface. His eyes flickered with something sharp, something calculating. Slowly, a smirk crept onto his face. Good. Because this wasn't just another interview. This was going to be a battle. And only one man would walk away victorious. As the studio doors swung open, 100 pairs of eyes locked onto Elon Musk. He entered with an air of quiet confidence, walking as though he had been on the stage 100 times before. But in truth, this was unfamiliar territory. This was Bryant Palmer's domain, a battleground where words were weapons, where reputations were unraveled, where every guest who stepped into the spotlight found themselves dissected under the harsh glare of the cameras. And Palmer was ready. Sitting at his usual place under the brilliant studio lights, he methodically shuffled through his stack of question cards. But this was not mere preparation. It was a ritual. His smile, warm and welcoming on the surface, carried a deeper message beneath. I'm in control here. He adjusted his posture, leaned slightly forward, and with a calculated smirk he spoke. Elon Musk, the man we've all been waiting for. A genius, a madman, or perhaps the greatest threat to humanity. The audience erupted in applause, some cheering enthusiastically, others laughing with a hint of skepticism. The air in the room grew heavy with anticipation. Musk took his seat, completely unhurried. He reached for the bottle of water placed on the table, unscrewed the cap, took a measured sip, and only then lifted his gaze to meet Palmer's. His expression was unreadable. History will decide, he said, his voice calm, deliberate. Palmer chuckled, but there was an edge to it, like the glint of a blade. History? Palmer echoed. That's convenient, but let's talk about the present, shall we? You build rockets, self-driving cars, and now you're implanting chips into people's brains. Doesn't that sound a little godlike to you? A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, others whispered to one another. Musk tilted his head slightly, amusement flickering across his eyes. If I were playing God, I'd at least make sure my rockets never exploded. Laughter filled the studio once more. Even a few of Palmer's staff behind the cameras cracked a smile. But Palmer wasn't laughing. He twirled a pen between his fingers, eyes narrowing slightly. Let's talk about X, formerly Twitter, he said smoothly. You laid off thousands of employees, right before Christmas. Why? Was it really necessary to be that ruthless? Murmurs rippled through the audience. A few people shook their heads, waiting to see how Musk would respond. Musk leaned back slightly, still exuding a composed demeanor. His voice remained steady. The company was hemorrhaging $4 million a day, he stated plainly. If we hadn't restructured, it would have collapsed. And if it collapsed, every single employee would have lost their job, not just some. Palmer shrugged, his lips curling in mock sympathy. Tough, huh? Even billionaires have to make hard choices. Scattered laughter. Some chuckled knowingly. Others seemed uneasy, processing Musk's words. But Musk didn't flinch. His piercing gaze remained locked onto Palmer as he spoke slowly, deliberately. The hardest thing isn't making money, it's keeping it from disappearing. A hush fell over the studio. Palmer moistened his lips, sensing a subtle but undeniable shift in the room. He was still running the show. Or was he? He decided to push harder. Elon, he said, his voice smooth but pressing. You have an enormous amount of power. X, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink. You control social media, technology, space, and now, potentially, the human brain. At what point should we be worried about that? The audience murmured in agreement. This was no longer about business. This was about power. Musk slowly set his water bottle down on the table, but instead of answering immediately, he let the silence stretch just long enough for the tension to become palpable. Then, finally, he spoke. What about your power, Bryant? The room went silent. Palmer blinked, just for a fraction of a second, but Musk caught it. He hadn't expected this. What do you mean? Palmer asked, maintaining his composure. Musk leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but unmistakably sharp. You control the narrative. You decide who gets to speak and who doesn't. You pick which questions to ask and which ones to ignore. You sit there, acting as if you're the voice of the people. Musk paused. But who funds this show? The audience gasped. Palmer parted his lips, but before he could speak, Musk continued. I build companies. I succeed. I fail. And when I fail, the world sees it. But what about you? Have you ever challenged the people who really write your paychecks? Somewhere in the audience, a single person clapped, then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire studio erupted. Palmer blinked rapidly, reaching for another question card, trying to regain control. But it was too late. The game had changed. And for the first time in his career, Bryant Palmer was no longer the one asking the tough questions. Palmer could feel his heartbeat accelerating, but he couldn't let the audience see it. Even as control slipped through his fingers, he reminded himself he was a master of redirection. He had turned the tide before. He could do it again. He flipped to a new card, this time keeping his voice measured, steady. But underneath, a sharp edge remained. "Elon," Palmer said, his tone laced with quiet intensity, "people call you a genius, a revolutionary. But there are also those who believe you're dangerous, someone creating technologies that could spiral out of control. Do you ever think about the long-term consequences of what you're doing?" The room fell silent. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about corporate restructuring or financial decisions. This was ethics, and even the most powerful people could falter under the weight of that question. Musk regarded Palmer with an expression of serene composure. He leaned back slightly, crossing his arms, inhaling slowly before speaking. "I think about the future all the time." He let the words settle before continuing. "But your question makes a flawed assumption." Palmer raised an eyebrow. "What assumption?" Musk tilted his head, his gaze sharpening. "The assumption that I'm the only one with power." The studio froze. Palmer's eyes flickered with a hint of unease. He hadn't expected that. Musk leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but carrying a weight that pressed against the silence. "People love to talk about me as if I alone control technology, but that's not reality. Do you know who actually controls the world?" Palmer shrugged. "Huh?" Musk let out a small, knowing smile. "The people you never see on camera, the hidden entities that control trillions of dollars. The investors who manipulate markets, the politicians who pass laws in their favor. If you're really so worried about power getting out of control, why don't you ever talk about them?" The silence that followed was heavy. The audience began glancing at each other, some nodding slowly, others furrowing their brows, processing the weight of Musk's words. Palmer opened his mouth, ready to push back. But Musk wasn't done. "You're concerned about the consequences of technology? Fine, but let's be honest, Bryant. Are you worried about all technology, or just the technology that I create?" Palmer exhaled through his nose, shifting slightly in his seat. "What exactly are you implying?" Musk's expression didn't waver. "Facebook, Google, Amazon. They collect data from billions of people. They track every click, every search, every purchase. But you never seem to question them. You only question me." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Palmer forced a casual shrug, trying to appear unaffected. "Maybe because you're the one sitting here, Elon." Musk tilted his head slightly. "Or maybe because they're the ones paying for ad space on your show." The impact of that statement sliced through the air like a blade. A few gasps echoed through the room. Some audience members exchanged shocked glances. Others let out small, stunned laughs. Not laughing at Musk, but at the realization he had just planted in their minds. Palmer wet his lips. For the first time that night, he had no immediate comeback. Musk leaned in, seizing the moment. "You think I have too much power? Fine. But who actually controls the information people consume every day? Who decides what's important and what gets buried?" A single clap came from somewhere in the audience. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire studio erupted in applause. Palmer's fingers tightened around his cue cards, but there was an unmistakable tremor in his hands. For the first time in his career, Bryant Palmer had lost control of the narrative. The interview had ended, but its impact did not fade like any ordinary broadcast. Everything was supposed to go according to Palmer's meticulously planned script. Musk would be cornered, relentlessly questioned until he had no escape, and once again, another powerful figure would be exposed before millions of viewers. But tonight, something happened that no one saw coming. Minutes after the interview aired, X, formerly Twitter, erupted. Short, clipped segments from the show spread at lightning speed, subtitles added, snippets reposted across every major platform. The internet was devouring the moment in real time. One small account with only a few thousand followers uploaded a crucial clip. "Elon Musk? Who really controls the media?" That single clip amassed millions of views in under an hour. But it wasn't just the numbers that shocked the media world, it was the reaction. Palmer thought he was exposing Musk, but in the end, it was Palmer who got exposed. This is the first time I've seen a CEO not only handle an interview, but completely dominate it. Unbelievable. This isn't just an interview. This is a turning point in how we see the media. Hashtags like Palmer vs. Musk, Who Controls the Media, and Musk Unfiltered shot up to the top of trending lists worldwide. Within the hour, analysts, commentators, and influencers joined the debate. Musk's supporters hailed his performance as a masterclass in handling media manipulation. His critics claimed he had skillfully dodged real accountability. But there was one thing no one could deny. This was unlike any interview ever broadcasted. Meanwhile, a few blocks away from the studio, the control room at the broadcast network was in chaos. A massive screen displayed live audience engagement metrics, a graph tracking real-time reactions throughout the interview. One peak towered above the rest, the precise moment Musk turned the tables on Palmer. A senior executive exhaled heavily. "We have a problem." Another executive, watching the skyrocketing ratings, countered, "We have record-breaking viewership." The show's PR director tapped their fingers against the table, deep in thought. Yes, but not in the way we wanted. Palmer was supposed to be in control tonight. The entire room turned to Palmer, who sat stiffly, his eyes locked on the screens where articles and comments were rapidly dissecting the interview. Some headlines questioned what had just unfolded. Are Palmer's interviews truly unbiased, or are they scripted spectacles? Palmer narrowed his eyes. His entire career had been built on the reputation of being the fearless interviewer who asked the questions no one else dared to. But tonight, for the first time ever, he was the one being questioned. A network executive leaned forward. "We need to regain control of this narrative immediately." Palmer nodded, but inside he knew the truth. Control was no longer in his hands. Outside the studio, Elon Musk stepped into his Tesla, the sleek vehicle humming quietly as he settled into the back seat. His phone screen was overflowing with notifications, mentions, reactions, reposts, but he didn't respond right away. He didn't have to. This wasn't his conversation anymore. It belonged to the people. As he scrolled through the trending topics, one particular post caught his attention. Hundreds of thousands of likes, tens of thousands of shares. Tonight's showdown between Palmer and Musk wasn't just an interview. It was a historic moment. A moment that forces us to rethink everything we thought we knew about the media. Musk let out a small, amused exhale before slipping his phone into his pocket. He knew one thing for certain. From this moment forward, no one would ever look at the media the same way again. Are we truly hearing the truth? This question was no longer just about Elon Musk or Bryant Palmer. It was about all of us. And once a thought like that has been planted in people's minds, it doesn't just disappear. What do you think? Was this simply a heated debate, or did it reveal something much bigger about the way information is controlled? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more fascinating showdowns, hit like and subscribe so you never miss another one. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next gripping story.